I'm going to tell you about my 6 months working as a night security guard at a pharmaceutical distribution warehouse just outside Omaha, Nebraska. And I'm going to tell you exactly why I quit without notice in the middle of my shift, leaving behind a decent paycheck, health benefits, and what I thought was a stable future. Because I discovered I wasn't alone in that building. Something else was living there. Something that had been watching me for weeks. Something that I can't explain, even now, 2 years later. This story is completely true. I've changed some minor details to protect my identity and the company I worked for, but everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. I still have the photos of the evidence. I still have the incident reports. And I still have nightmares about what I saw in that warehouse. Let me start from the beginning. It was early 2019, and I was 29 years old. I just moved back to Omaha after a failed attempt at starting a business in Denver. I was broke, living with my parents temporarily, and desperately looking for work. Any work. I wasn't picky. I just needed something to pay the bills while I figured out my next move. I found the security guard position through a temp agency. The listing was straightforward. Overnight security at a pharmaceutical distribution warehouse. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. $15 an hour, which wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. The job description made it sound easy. Walk the building every hour, check the cameras, make sure no one's stealing inventory. No special skills required. No previous security experience necessary. I applied on a Monday. They called me Tuesday. I had an interview Wednesday. By Thursday, I was hired and scheduled for training the following week. The training was minimal. 2 8-hour shifts with the guy I was replacing, a man in his 60s named Carl who was retiring to Arizona. Carl showed me the security office, explained the camera system, gave me the patrol routes, and handed me a massive ring of keys. "It's the easiest job you'll ever have," Carl told me on my second night of training. 99% of the time, absolutely nothing happens. You'll be bored out of your mind. Bring a book. Bring your laptop. Just stay awake and do your hourly patrols, and you'll be fine. "What about the other 1%? I asked. Carl shrugged. "Sometimes the fire alarm goes off for no reason. Sometimes a truck shows up at the wrong time. Sometimes you get a homeless person trying to sleep in the loading dock. Nothing you can't handle. Just call your supervisor if anything weird happens." "Define weird," I said. Carl laughed. "Trust me, nothing weird ever happens here. This place is dead. That's why I've worked here for 12 years. No stress, no problems, no excitement. Just you and the building." He was right about the boredom. For the first 5 months, this was the most boring job I'd ever had. And I loved it. Let me describe the warehouse so you can understand the layout. The building was enormous. About 200,000 square feet of industrial space, roughly the size of 3 football fields. It was a single-story structure with 30-foot ceilings and industrial fluorescent lighting throughout. The interior was divided into 6 main zones, labeled A through F. Each zone contained rows and rows of industrial pallet racking, those massive metal shelving units you see in warehouses that go up 25 feet high. The shelves held pallets of pharmaceutical products, over-the-counter medications, prescription drugs waiting for distribution, medical supplies, anything you'd find in a pharmacy. The main corridor ran down the center of the building, with zones branching off on either side. There were smaller corridors between the shelving units, creating a maze-like layout. If you didn't know your way around, you could easily get lost. The security office was located near the main entrance at the front of the building. It was a small room, maybe 10 by 10 feet, with a desk, an office chair, a coffee maker, and a wall of CCTV monitors. 12 screens total, showing different angles of the warehouse. The cameras covered all the main corridors and most of the zones, but there were definitely blind spots. The tops of the shelving units, for example, weren't visible on any camera. My job was simple. Clock in at 10 p.m. Do an initial walkthrough of the entire building to make sure everything was secure. Return to the office and monitor the cameras. Every hour, do another walking patrol with my flashlight, checking doors and looking for anything unusual. At 6 a.m., clock out and go home. Most nights, I'd see absolutely no one. I was completely alone in that massive building for 8 hours straight. And honestly, I liked it. No customers, no coworkers, no boss breathing down my neck. Just me, my phone, my coffee, and the quiet hum of the warehouse. The building had motion-activated lighting to save on electricity. When you walked into an aisle, the overhead fluorescent lights would automatically turn on. When you stood still for more than 2 minutes, they'd automatically shut off. It was an efficient system. During my patrols, I'd watch the lights turn on ahead of me as I walked, then turn off behind me after I passed. It became almost meditative, walking through the darkness with lights appearing and disappearing around me. For 5 months, everything was routine, boring, predictable. Then, in my 6th month, something changed. It started small. So small I almost didn't notice it at first. I was sitting in the security office one night in early October, scrolling through social media on my phone, half watching the CCTV monitors out of the corner of my eye. It was around 2 in the morning. I'd already done my 2 a.m. patrol and was settling in for the next hour of boredom. Then I noticed something on one of the monitors. The lights in Zone C had just turned on. I watched as the overhead fluorescents clicked on in sequence, one after another, traveling down one of the aisles. It looked exactly like someone was walking down that corridor. The lights turned on ahead of them, following their movement. I looked at the camera feed for Zone C. The angle showed the aisle from the end, looking down the length of it. I could see the lights on, illuminating empty shelves and concrete floor. But I couldn't see anyone walking. I stared at the monitor, waiting. The lights continued to travel down the aisle, activating one after another, until they reached about halfway. Then they stopped. All the lights in that section remained on. I watched the monitor. Still no one visible. After exactly 2 minutes, the lights shut off. The aisle went dark again. But not alarming. I figured it was probably a rat or a bird that had gotten into the building somehow. The motion sensors were sensitive. They'd pick up small animals. It happened sometimes in warehouses this size. Pigeons would get in through the loading docks, or mice would nest in the corners. The sensors would detect them and activate the lights. I made a mental note to check Zone C during my 3 a.m. patrol. An hour later, I grabbed my flashlight and headed to Zone C. I walked down the exact aisle where I'd seen the lights activate. I shined my flashlight under the shelving units, looking for droppings or nests or any sign of animals. Nothing. The floor was clean. No evidence of any creatures at all. I checked behind boxes, in corners, along the walls. Still nothing. I went back to the office and logged it in my report as motion lights activated in Zone C, possible animal, no evidence found upon inspection. The next night, it happened again. Different zone this time. Zone, same pattern. Lights activating in sequence down an empty aisle, stopping halfway, staying on for 2 minutes, then shutting off. I checked the camera. No one visible. I went to investigate during my next patrol. Found nothing. The 3rd night, it happened in Zone B. The 4th night, Zone A. By the end of that first week, it was happening every single night. Multiple times per night. Different zones, different aisles, but always the same pattern. I started keeping detailed notes. I'd write down the time, the zone, which specific aisle, how far the lights traveled before stopping. I was looking for patterns, trying to figure out what was causing it. What I discovered disturbed me. The lights always activated when I was sitting in the office. Never during my patrols. Only when I was stationary, watching the monitors. They always followed a walking pattern. Consistent speed, consistent spacing between activations. Like footsteps. They always stopped somewhere in the middle of the aisle. Never at the end. They'd stop, stay on for exactly 2 minutes, then shut off. And here's what really bothered me. The stopping points were always near the shelving units. Like whatever was triggering the sensors would walk halfway down the aisle, then move to the side, then stand completely still for 2 minutes. I reported it to my supervisor, a guy named Tom who worked day shift and rarely came to the warehouse at night. I called him during one of my shifts and explained what was happening. "Sounds like the sensors are going bad," he said. "We've had electrical issues before. I'll put in a work order to have them checked." "I don't think it's the sensors," I told him. "The pattern is too consistent. It's not random." "Derek, motion sensors malfunction all the time. Especially in old buildings like this. It's probably just faulty wiring or interference from something. Don't worry about it." But I was worried about it. Because the more I watched it happen, the more convinced I became that the sensors weren't malfunctioning. Something was walking through that warehouse at night. Something I couldn't see on the cameras. By the second week, I was obsessed with it. I'd position myself in front of the monitors, watching intently, waiting for it to happen. And it always did. Multiple times per night. I started trying to catch it. As soon as I saw lights activate on a monitor, I'd grab my flashlight and sprint to that zone. I wanted to see what was triggering the sensors. But I was never fast enough. By the time I got there, the lights would already be off and the aisle would be empty. I tried a different approach. I started doing longer patrols, walking through multiple zones, staying out of the office for 30 or 40 minutes at a time. I thought maybe if I was already in the warehouse, already moving, I might encounter whatever was moving through the aisles. But it didn't work. The lights only activated when I was back in the office. It was like whatever was out there knew where I was. Knew when I was watching the monitors. Knew when it was safe to move. That thought terrified me more than I wanted to admit. I started bringing my flashlight with me everywhere, even just to the bathroom. I'd keep it in my hand during my entire shift, pointed at the ground, ready to use at a moment's notice. I started feeling watched. You know that feeling when you're alone but your instincts tell you someone's there? That sensation of being observed? I felt it constantly. During my patrols, walking through those dark aisles, I'd get this overwhelming sense that something was looking at me, following me, tracking my movements. I'd spin around suddenly, shining my flashlight behind me, expecting to see something. But there was never anything there. Just empty aisles and shadows. By the third week, I was barely sleeping during the day. I'd get home at 6:30 in the morning, exhausted from my shift, but unable to sleep. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about those lights. Thinking about what could be moving through that warehouse. I started researching motion sensors, trying to understand how they could be triggered. I learned that most commercial motion sensors use passive infrared technology. They detect heat signatures. Movement of warm objects triggers them, which meant whatever was activating those sensors had to be producing heat, had to be alive. I also learned that the sensors have a detection range. They don't see everything. They're designed to detect movement at ground level, in the aisles, where workers would be walking. They're not designed to detect movement above them, on top of the shelving units. That's when I had a horrible thought. What if something was living on top of those shelves? In the blind spots of the cameras? In the areas the motion sensors couldn't see? What if it had been up there the whole time, watching me during my patrols? I tried to push the thought out of my mind. Told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself I was letting the isolation and the night shifts get to me. But I couldn't shake the feeling. On my next shift, I brought a pair of binoculars from home. During one of my patrols, I stopped in the middle of an aisle and used them to look up at the tops of the shelving units. It was too dark to see clearly. The lights didn't reach all the way up there. Just shadows and metal framework and darkness. But I thought I saw something move. Just for a second. A shape shifting in the shadows. I stood there, frozen, staring up through the binoculars. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. Nothing. Just darkness. I lowered the binoculars and continued my patrol, walking faster than usual. That was 3 weeks into the strange activity. 3 weeks of lights activating, 3 weeks of feeling watched, 3 weeks of steadily increasing paranoia. And then came the night that changed everything. Tuesday, October 15, 2019. I'll never forget that date. I clocked in at 10 p.m. like always. Did my initial walkthrough. Everything seemed normal. The warehouse was quiet, empty, exactly as I'd left it the night before. I went back to the office, made myself coffee, settled into the chair. I pulled out my phone and opened a podcast, trying to distract myself from the creeping anxiety I'd been feeling. The first few hours of my shift passed without incident. I did my 11 p.m. patrol, midnight patrol, 1 a.m. patrol. Everything was quiet. At 2:30 a.m., I was due for my next patrol. But before I could stand up, I noticed something on the monitors. Lights were activating in Zone A, the main corridor, the one I'd be walking through to access the other zones. I watched the monitor. The lights traveled down the corridor, one after another, in that familiar walking pattern. But this time, something was different. This time, the lights were moving faster than usual. Much faster. Whatever was triggering them was moving quickly. Almost running. I leaned forward in my chair, staring at the monitor. The camera angle showed the corridor from the side. I could see the lights turning on, could see the empty floor beneath them. And then I saw something else. A shadow. Just for a fraction of a second. A dark shape moving along the top of the frame, above the lights, above where the camera could fully capture. My blood went cold. D across all 4 limbs, body low, ready to spring. My mind was screaming at me to run, but my body wouldn't move. I was frozen, staring up at this thing, trying to process what I was seeing. And then it moved. It scuttled across the top of the shelving unit with horrifying, impossible speed. Its limbs moved in a blur, carrying it laterally across the top shelf, then down the side, then across to the next unit. And it made that sound. That scraping sound. Metal claws or talons or something dragging across the steel shelving with each rapid movement. That broke my paralysis. I ran. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan it. My body just took over and I sprinted back toward the security office as fast as I could. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I ran. The overhead lights clicked on ahead of me, activated by my movement. And behind me, above me, I could hear it following. The scraping sound moving fast. Too fast. Keeping pace with me. Maybe gaining. I didn't look back. I just ran. The distance from where I'd been to the security office was probably 200 feet. It felt like miles. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and panicked. I could hear my boots hitting the concrete. I could hear that thing moving across the tops of the shelves, tracking me, following me. When I finally reached the office, I crashed through the door so hard I almost fell. I slammed it shut behind me, twisted the lock, and stood there with my back against the door, gasping for air. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. No scraping sounds. No movement. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My hands were shaking violently. My legs felt weak. I thought I might throw up. I pulled out my phone. My fingers could barely work the screen. I pulled up my supervisor's contact and called him. It rang 4 times. Then his voicemail picked up. I hung up and called again. This time he answered on the 3rd ring. What? His voice was thick with sleep, annoyed. Tom, it's Derek. I need you to send someone to the warehouse. Right now. What time is it? It's 2:45. There's someone in the warehouse. I need backup. There was a pause. Someone broke in? I don't know. There's something in Zone A. On top of the shelving units. I saw it. It followed me. Derek, slow down. What exactly did you see? Something on top of the shelves. Something big. It was moving across them. It followed me back to the office. Another pause. Are you drunk? What? I'm not drunk. I saw something. Derek, you sound hysterical. Take a breath. Did you actually see a person? I don't know what I saw. It was too dark. Too far up. But there's something in here. Stay in the office. Lock the door. I'll send Martinez over. Don't leave the office until he gets there, understand? Yeah. How long? He lives about 30 minutes away. Maybe 45. Just stay put. He hung up. I stood there in the office, phone in my shaking hand, trying to calm down. I looked at the CCTV monitors. Every screen showed empty aisles. Normal warehouse. Nothing moving. I turned up the volume on the monitor speakers. The cameras had audio, though the quality wasn't great. And then I heard it. From the Zone A camera feed. That scraping sound. I watched the Zone A monitor. The camera showed the main corridor from an angle. Empty floor. Bright lights. The scraping sound came again. Movement, but not in frame. It was still out there. Moving through the warehouse. I sat down in the chair and watched the monitors for the next 45 minutes. I didn't move. Didn't look away. Just watched. The scraping sounds continued, moving from zone to zone. Sometimes I'd catch a shadow moving at the edge of a frame. Sometimes the lights would activate in an aisle, following that walking pattern, but nothing visible on the cameras. It was searching the warehouse. Looking for me. At 3:30 a.m., I saw headlights in the parking lot through the front window. Martinez's truck. Thank God. A few minutes later, Tom's car pulled up too. They both came to the office door. I unlocked it and let them in. Martinez was in his 40s, ex-military, built like a linebacker. He looked alert despite being woken up in the middle of the night. Tom looked skeptical and annoyed. Show us where you saw it, Tom said. We went to Zone A together. All 3 of us. Martinez had brought a high-powered flashlight. Tom had his phone camera ready. We stood in the spot where I'd been when I first saw it. I pointed up at the shelving unit. It was right there, I said. On the top shelf. Crouched. Martinez shined his light up. The beam was much more powerful than mine, illuminating the top of the shelving clearly. Empty. Nothing there. I'm not lying, I said. It was there. I saw it. I believe you saw something, Tom said, his tone suggesting he didn't. But there's nothing there now. It moved, I said. It can move across the tops of the shelves. It went from here to there. I pointed across to the other side of the corridor. Martinez walked over to that shelving unit. He shined his light up. And then he said, Tom, come look at this. Tom and I walked over. Martinez pointed his light at the top edge of the shelf. There were marks on the metal. Deep gouges. 4 parallel lines, each about an inch apart. Like claw marks. What the hell? Tom muttered. Martinez climbed up on the first shelf, then the second, getting a closer look. He pulled out his phone and took pictures. "These are fresh," he called down. "The metal's still bright where it's been scratched. This just happened." Tom looked at me. His expression had changed from skeptical to concerned. "We need to search the whole building," he said. For the next hour, the three of us systematically went through every zone. Martinez and Tom would check each aisle while I watched from the end, my flashlight ready. We found nothing. No one hiding. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows or doors. But we found more marks. Plus more. On top of shelving units in Zone B, Zone C, Zone E. Some of the marks looked old, the metal oxidized. Some looked fresh. Martinez took photos of all of them. "How long have you been working here?" he asked me. 6 months. "And you never saw these before?" "I never looked up there before." "Why would I?" Tom was on his phone, typing something. He looked shaken. "I'm filing an incident report," he said. "And I'm calling pest control first thing in the morning." "You think this is an animal?" I asked. "I don't know what else it could be." "No animal in Nebraska is big enough to make marks like that," Martinez said. "And no animal can climb smooth metal shelving." "Then what is it?" Tom asked. Nobody answered. Tom looked at me. "Can you finish your shift?" I laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. "Are you serious? I'll pay you double time for the rest of the night. Martinez can stay with you if you want." I looked at Martinez. He shrugged. "I'm awake anyway." I said. "But I'm not doing any more solo patrols." "Fair enough." Tom left. Martinez and I went back to the security office. We sat there together, watching the monitors until my shift ended at 6 a.m. The lights didn't activate again that night. No scraping sounds. No shadows. Whatever had been moving through the warehouse had gone quiet. When 6 a.m. came, I clocked out, got in my car, and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. I should have quit right then. I should have driven away and never come back. But I needed the money. And part of me, the stupid part, thought maybe it was over. Maybe whatever it was had left. Maybe it wouldn't come back. I was wrong. I came back the next night. Martinez met me in the parking lot. Tom had arranged for him to work a second guard position on nights for a while, just until they figured out what was going on. "Pest control came today," Martinez told me as we walked into the building. "They looked at the marks. Took samples. They're sending them to some lab for analysis." What did they think? They didn't know what to think. One guy said maybe it was a bear, but there's no way a bear could climb up there. Another guy suggested it might be raccoons, but raccoons don't make marks that deep. They're stumped. Great. That night was quiet. Martinez and I did patrols together every hour. We didn't see anything unusual. Didn't hear anything. The motion lights behaved normally. 3 nights passed like that. Quiet. Uneventful. I started to relax a little. Started to think maybe it really was over. Then, on the 4th night, it happened again. It was 3 a.m. Martinez had gone to the bathroom. I was alone in the office, watching the monitors. The lights in Zone F activated. The walking pattern. Fast movement. My heart sank. I grabbed my radio. "Martinez. Zone F. Lights are activating." On my way, his voice crackled back. I kept watching the monitor. The lights traveled down the aisle, then stopped. But this time, something was different. This time, I saw it on camera. Just for a second. A dark shape moving across the top of the frame. Above the shelving units. Moving from one side to the other. Then it was gone. Martinez burst into the office. "What did you see?" "It's in Zone F. I saw it on camera. Top of the shelves." We both ran to Zone F. When we got there, the aisle was empty. Lights on. Nothing visible. Martinez shined his flashlight up at the tops of the shelves. There, he said. I looked where he was pointing. Marks. Fresh ones. And this time, there was something else. A piece of fabric. Dark material, caught on a sharp edge of the shelving. Martinez climbed up and retrieved it. It was about 4 inches long, torn, looked like it might have been part of someone's clothing. Except it didn't look like any fabric I'd ever seen. The texture was wrong. Almost leathery. What is that? I asked. I don't know, Martinez said. But I'm keeping it. He put it in his pocket. We searched the rest of Zone F, but didn't find anything else. When we got back to the office, Martinez was quiet. He kept touching his pocket where he'd put the fabric, like he was making sure it was still there. Derek, he said finally, I've worked security for 15 years. Military before that. I've seen a lot of weird stuff. But this, I don't know what this is. Should we call the police? I asked. And tell them what? That motion lights are activating and we found some scratches? They're not going to do anything. He was right. We finished the shift without further incident. But as I was clocking out, Martinez stopped me. I'm going to have that fabric analyzed, he said. I know a guy who works at a lab. He owes me a favor. I'll see what he can tell us. Okay. In the meantime, Martinez continued, watch yourself. Don't do any solo patrols. If you see anything, hear anything, radio me immediately. And if that thing comes at you again, run. Don't try to be a hero. Just get out. Trust me, I said. I'm not planning to stick around if I see it again. I should have quit right then. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I worked 5 more shifts. 5 more nights of increasing paranoia. 5 more nights of feeling watched, feeling hunted. The activity continued. Lights activating. Scraping sounds. Shadows on the cameras. More marks appearing on the shelving units. Martinez stopped coming after the 3rd night. Tom told me he'd taken a different job. Quit with only 2 days' notice. I didn't blame him. Tom hired a new guy to work with me. Young kid, maybe 22, named Ryan. On Ryan's 2nd night, he saw something. Wouldn't tell me exactly what, but he didn't show up for his 3rd shift. They assigned me another partner. She lasted 1 week. Then Tom told me they were having trouble finding people willing to work nights. He asked if I'd be okay working solo again, just for a little while. I said no. Tom offered me an extra $3 an hour. I said no again. Tom sighed. Derek, I understand you're spooked. But we've had pest control here 3 times. We've had exterminators. We've had structural engineers inspect the building. Nobody's found anything. Whatever was here, it's probably gone now. Or it's hiding, I said. From what? We've searched every inch of this place. You've searched the floor. Have you searched the tops of the shelves? Tom didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said. So what do you want to do? Tom asked. You want to quit? I thought about it. I really did. But I needed the money. I had rent due. I had car payments. I had student loans. I'll work solo, I said finally. But only in the office. No patrols. I'll watch the cameras. If anything looks wrong, I'll call you immediately. But I'm not walking around this building alone. Tom agreed. That lasted exactly 1 shift. On my 1st night working solo with no patrols, the activity went crazy. Lights activating in every single zone. All night long. Constant movement on the cameras, but nothing visible. Scraping sounds coming through the audio feeds so loud I had to turn the volume down. It was like whatever was in the warehouse knew I was alone. Knew I was trapped in the office. And it was playing with me. At 4 a.m., all the lights in the building went out at once. Complete darkness. I grabbed my flashlight. Tried the light switch in the office. Nothing. My radio crackled. Static. Then a voice. Not Tom. Not Martinez. Not anyone I recognized. Just breathing. Heavy, wet breathing. I threw the radio across the room. I sat in the dark office, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other, trying to decide what to do. That's when I heard it. Scraping. Right outside the office door. Something was in the hallway. Just on the other side of the door. I could see the shadow under the door frame. Something blocking the light from the hallway. The door handle moved. Something, was trying to open it. I'd locked it. Thank God I'd locked it. The handle rattled again. Then stopped. Silence. I sat there, barely breathing, waiting. Scraping sounds. Moving away from the door. Down the hallway. I waited 5 minutes. Then 10. Finally, I stood up. Unlocked the door. Opened it slowly. The hallway was empty. The lights were back on. I walked to my car and I drove home. I didn't clock out. Didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Just got in my car and drove. At noon, Tom called me. Derek, what happened? You didn't clock out. You just left. I quit, I said. What? Why? Something tried to get into the office last night. Derek. I'm done, Tom. Find someone else. I'm not going back there. Can we at least talk about this? No. I'm done. Send me my final paycheck. I hung up. That was 8 months ago. I found a new job. Day shift at a retail store. It pays less, but I don't care. I still keep in touch with Martinez. He texted me a few weeks after I quit. The fabric he'd sent to the lab? They couldn't identify it. It wasn't synthetic. Wasn't any natural fiber they recognized. The cells were wrong. The lab tech said it almost looked like human skin, but the cellular structure didn't match any known species. Martinez told me he'd heard through the grapevine that the warehouse was having trouble keeping security guards. They'd gone through 7 people in 2 months. Most quit within a week. One guard had a breakdown during his shift. Had to be taken to the hospital. Told the paramedics that something was watching him from the walls. Last I heard, they'd shut down the night shift entirely. The warehouse now closes at 6 p.m. and doesn't reopen until 6 a.m. They've installed additional cameras, additional lighting, motion sensors throughout the entire building. But according to Martinez, things still happen. The cameras pick up movement at night when the building is supposed to be empty. The motion sensors trigger constantly. And every few weeks, they find new marks on the shelving units. Whatever is living in that warehouse is still there. And I have no idea what it is. Sometimes late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about all those shifts I worked alone. All those hours I spent walking through that warehouse, completely unaware of what was above me. How many times was it watching me? How many times did I walk directly beneath it, oblivious, while it crouched in the shadows 25 feet above my head? And I think about the other guards. The ones working there now. The ones who don't know what I know. I hope they're careful. I hope they watch the shadows. Because whatever is in that warehouse, it's patient. It's intelligent. And it's always watching. Boys.